Welcome to the Platinum Freight Podcast with Peter McRae, a podcast for business owners sharing the latest news and tips about customs clearance and freight forwarding. Welcome to episode 13 of the Platinum Freight Podcast with Peter McRae, Customs Broker. In this episode, we're focusing on importing to New Zealand via the postal system. So, Peter, let's start with an overview. How does the process of importing goods to New Zealand via the postal system work from the sender's post office to the receiver in New Zealand?
So whenever you purchase goods from overseas, and if the sender overseas is going to send your goods by the postal system, it's going to mean that the person overseas will go to their local post office and they'll send your goods to New Zealand. And usually, if the goods are going to go by the postal system, the package would be, let's say, less than 20 kilograms. So it's going to be a small package. It could be low value or it could be high value, but generally the postal network will only accept packages which are under 20 kilos. So if you plan, or if your supplier overseas wishes to send, say, 40 kilograms, then they're going to send 2 packages to New Zealand for you. So then the post office overseas will place those goods more than likely onto an aircraft, and then the aircraft will then bring the goods to the International Mail Centre in Auckland. And depending on what the outside label on the parcel says, will then determine if the package gets released or if the package gets held. The New Zealand Customs Service will want the package or packages held if the value of the goods within the package is over 1,000 New Zealand dollars. If the goods are over 1,000 New Zealand dollars, then the New Zealand customer, the importer, will receive a notice. The notice generally arrives in the mail, and it will say that the parcel or the parcels have been held and that they need to be customs cleared and that they need to pay tax. If for example, the package is less than 1,000 New Zealand dollars, then that package will then just leave the International Mail Centre and then be sent on to the importer's address or to the importer's local post office for them to collect.
Now, what are the pros and cons of using New Zealand Post for customs clearance versus hiring a dedicated customs broker, especially for businesses that regularly post or import parcels?
I'll just say that if the goods are under $1,000, then the importer doesn't need a customs broker, and that parcel will just go through the International Mail Centre. But if the goods are over 1,000 New Zealand dollars, then there's possibly 3 charges that the importer needs to pay. So the first charge will be if there's any import duty. The second will be any import GST. Then the third one is the New Zealand Customs Service will charge an entry or an import processing charge of $81.25 plus GST. So they're the 3 government charges. Then the importer will have a choice, and that choice will be, do they want New Zealand Post to do the customs clearance? And generally, New Zealand Post will charge something like $60 plus GST. So to import goods that are over 1,000 New Zealand dollars, there's 4 fees. Some goods will pay import duty, some won't. Most goods will pay the import GST. All shipments will have to pay the $81.25 import processing charge, and then they'll then have to determine, do they want New Zealand Post to clear the package, or do they want an independent customs broker to clear the package? So our company, we're happy either way. We're happy if the importer wants to have New Zealand Post clear the package, but if the importer wants a more dedicated service and wants to deal with one person to have the package processed, then obviously having a customs broker would be the better option. If the importer is a business, then we would recommend that the importing business relies on a customs broker to clear the packages, because the customs broker would become familiar with the goods that the New Zealand business is importing and would be able to clear the goods more than likely on the same day that the importing business provides the paperwork. And then it just is a different type of service, because I hear stories all the time where it's difficult to get onto somebody at New Zealand Post, or there's a delay in receiving responses by email. So if we were the customs broker, for example, they would liaise with us, we'd do the clearance, we'd work out the tax, we'd invoice the customer pays us, and then the package can then leave the International Mail Centre in Auckland and then make its way to the next stage. So, and usually this next stage, where the package moves from Auckland to the next delivery spot, whether that's in Dunedin or Wellington or Christchurch, that usually happens quite quickly. So there's not a long delay for that parcel to reach its destination. And New Zealand Post would be the people that will deliver that parcel after it's been released at the International Mail Centre.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the International Mail Centre and how they process those parcels?
So in New Zealand, there's just one International Mail Centre, and that's in Auckland at the Auckland Airport. And the function is to receive all the parcels that arrive via the postal network. And most of these parcels will arrive by air freight on an aircraft, and the function of the IMC will be to look at the outside label of every box, every package, to assess what the value of that package is, and based on the figure that's listed on that label, will then determine if the IMC can release the package to the receiver, to the importer. And that's the function of the IMC. So as a side note, some importers are not aware that if they spend over 1,000 New Zealand dollars, and if they ask their overseas supplier to split the shipment into 2 or 3, that the New Zealand Customs Service will assess the shipment as one, and the 2 or the 3 packages will be held, and the total value combined will have the tax assessed. So it's important not to fall into the assumption that if you split the packages, you won't pay tax. We have seen situations where an order has been split, and then packages arrive on the same day under 1,000 New Zealand dollars, and the packages are held and tax has to be paid. So just a comment there that it's probably easier and painless just to order the one order, have the one order shipped, pay the tax if need be, and then the order can then be released and then delivered to you.
Now, can you share a case study or some examples of businesses that regularly import parcels to New Zealand and how having a customs broker has benefited them?
So one of the most recent examples that I can think of is we had an importing business based in Wellington. They had purchased some corporate uniforms from Australia. The package had arrived into the International Mail Centre. The importing business did not have a New Zealand customs importer code, and so we assisted them to have their importer code established, and then we then customs cleared the corporate uniforms, and then they could be delivered to the business in Wellington. And in all honesty, it was a little bit of a painful exercise because in order to get a New Zealand customs importer code, every director of the business has to provide one piece of photo identification. So for this one tiny shipment of corporate uniforms, which was under 20 kilograms, we had to ask for 5 photo IDs from, if I if I can remember correctly, there were 5 directors of the business. So we had to have the 5 directors provide their photo ID in order to get the business its importer code. So now that this business has their importer code, that code will now stay with that business for its lifetime, and we don't have to go through that exercise again. And any time that this company imports to New Zealand, we'll be able to process their packages through the International Mail Centre or the air cargo terminal or through the sea freight terminal if they ever have larger shipments arrive.
And finally, can you share some tips or best practices for importers to ensure a smooth process when importing goods to New Zealand via the postal system and how to avoid some of those common pitfalls?
The first thing that comes to my mind, and it's a proactive comment, is if an importer, whether they are an individual or whether they are a business, if they think or if they plan or if they have a shipment, whether it's coming by the postal system, by an express carrier, by air cargo or sea cargo, and if they have never ever imported to New Zealand in their name or their business name before, then they need to apply for the New Zealand Customs Importer Code, which is on a dedicated form on the New Zealand Customs website, and it's called a NZCS 224, and they need to have the application processed ahead of time. The process can take, for example, it could take 30 minutes or it could take 3 days. So the sooner that the importer or the importing business receives their code, it allows the rest of the process to go smoothly, and we're happy to assist importers in receiving their code, but we need the NZCS 224 to be completed with photo identification, and then we can then submit it to the NZCS, New Zealand Customs Service.
Thanks for sharing your insights and tips, Peter. Now, to learn more about customs clearance and freight management services, visit platinumfreight.co.nz.